All right, so 3.2, we are getting into describing the characteristics of functions. Okay, we already know what a function is. We already looked at what a function is. We're describing the characteristics of it. Okay, so looking at a function and being able to say something about it. The first thing we're talking about is called the X and Y intercepts. Okay, the first one we'll talk about is the Y-intercept. And the Y-intercept is simply where the graph crosses the Y-axis. Where the graph crosses the Y-axis. There's an X-intercept. We'll get there. Talk about this one first. Get a graph up here just so we can visualize it here a little bit. So let's say that I have this line. Okay, the Y-intercept is where the graph crosses the Y-axis. Y-axis is the up and down one, right? So vertical. So raise your hand and tell me, where does it cross that Y-axis? Where does it cross that vertical line? Bishop, 2. So our Y-intercept is 2. That's it. It's just that number where it crosses. Okay, nice and easy. Being the bright young minds that you are, you could probably write down the definition of an X-intercept. The same thing, it's just where it crosses the X-axis. There you go. Write it down. Okay, tell the person next to you, what is our X-intercept here? All right, and what's our X-intercept? Let me say it.
-3.
-3. Awesome. There we go. Great. Okay. So now, nice and easy, where it crosses the Y, where it crosses the X, you just got to make sure you know which one is the X and the Y. That's important. Let's look at this one. Let's go by this. Tell the person next to you, what are the X and Y intercepts?
Oh wait. So negative. So you're gonna have because you're gonna have 0 on there.
Okay, raise your hand and tell me, what are the Y-intercepts? What is the Y-intercept here? Where does it cross the Y, right?
0.
0. That is the only place where it crosses the Y-axis. The Y-axis is the up and down one, crosses at 0. Great, that's our Y-intercept. What about our X-intercept? Tim?
-4, -2, and 0.
-4, -2, and 0. So we can have more than one, right? If it crosses the line more than one, we have more than one. Great. We got 3 X-intercepts there. We got 1 Y-intercept. Perfectly fine. Any questions about X, Y-intercept? Great. That by far is the easiest part of today. Okay. Just look at the graph where it crosses. It definitely is getting bright. Yeah. All right. So moving on.
How many questions about it?
15. Not enough. All right. So moving forward, the other things that we need to talk about today can be confusing. I'm going to be upfront with you, okay? I'm going to do my best to explain exactly what we're looking at and how we solve them and all of that. But the 2 things that we're going to look at, the next 2 things we're going to look at are very, very similar to each other. So you need to have notes down, okay? You need to be paying attention. You need to be asking questions when you don't understand. There's nobody there, so air pressure. You're good. Okay. So you got to make sure we take notes here, okay? Especially if you're not going to do your homework until Sunday, you're not going to remember what we talked about unless you have notes. Okay. All right. So here we go. The first thing we were talking about is on a function or in a graph, we're going to talk about where the graph is positive and where the graph is negative. Now, when we talk about positive and negative, we're talking about the y values of the graph. So it is positive when the y values are positive, when it's above the x-axis. It's negative when it's below the x-axis. Right? They color coded it for us. Blue is positive, red is negative. So positive when it's above, negative when it's below. Right? That's what we're looking at right here. Tell the person next to you, how am I going to tell when it's positive, when it's negative?
When the y is positive, it's negative.
Okay, so we got a general idea. What's above is positive, what's below is negative. Okay. The hard part about this is representing it or telling us where on the graph it's going to be positive or negative using our inequalities. Because that's what we're going to do. Is we have to be able to write out it's negative here and use an inequality to do so. Okay. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to split up the graph so you know where it's positive, where it's negative. So anywhere where it changes from positive to negative, we're going to split up that graph. I want you to have this graph on your notes. If you don't, all right, I'll give you a minute. Draw that in your notes so we have it. That's going to help us to visualize what we're about to do. Doesn't have to be perfect. Just has to be there. Okay, so we need to use inequalities to say where on this graph is it going to be positive and where on this graph is it going to be negative. I got to put some numbers on here just so we have them. Let's say this is a 4, a negative 4, and a positive 4. Those dots. So you got to have numbers to be able to do it. So if I'm going to say where it's positive, there are two different sections of this graph where it's positive, right? There's one over here, there's one over here. Okay, let's start with the one over here. This is going to be the easier one to represent. For what x values is my graph positive over here? For what x values is my x going to be a positive graph? Not anything above 0. Anything above 0 is going to be here. I'm talking x, which is my side to side. Okay. Anything greater than 4, right? Any x that's greater than 4 is going to give me a positive graph. Okay, so we're always talking our x values when we do this. So we're talking our side to side. Anything bigger than 4 is going to give us a positive value. Okay. How can I represent this section right here? What x values are going to give me the positive numbers right here? Right?
Negative 4 is greater than x, greater than or equal to x, and 0.
Should be less than, right? Because x is here. So negative 4 is less than x, right? And x is less than 0. And we're going to use less than. We're not going to use less than or equal to. Because when it's on the axis, it's a value of 0, and 0 is neither positive nor negative. Okay, so that's why you're going to see the less than sign. It's not the less than or equal to. So this right here and right here are when it's going to be positive. It's going to be positive on this part of the graph, and it's going to be positive on this part of the graph. Okay. Any questions about that right now? What part of the graph is it going to be positive? It's going to be positive when x is bigger than 4. It's going to be positive when x is between negative 4 and 0.
So that means like on the homework, it will give you like 2 numbers, and then basically that's what you have to do.
the homework's gonna give you the graph. It's gonna say it's positive and have a blank, and it's gonna be one of those drag and drop. You're gonna have to pick which inequality is correct and put it there. Okay. Never? Yeah, so we're not saying X is positive, we're saying the Y value is positive. Above the graph means the Y value is positive. So Y is gonna be positive when X is between -4 and 0. Okay, so it's a different way of thinking. We're not thinking about X, we're thinking about Y, but where on that graph will that Y be positive? Anything else on the positive? Okay. So now, with the person next to you, I want you to come up with those two inequalities for when it's going to be negative. Come up with those two inequalities. When is our Y value going to be negative? Talk to us.
Yeah, wait, so, like, instead of the negative, it's positive. So. So when X is less than 4. Or greater.
Okay, so I know it's going to be negative on this portion of the graph. How would I represent this portion of the graph with an inequality? What am I going to say here? Alec? When X is less than -4. When X is less than -4, my Y value is going to be negative. Okay, what about this section of the graph right here? How do I represent that one? Lord? Perfect. That's it right there. These are when it's going to be negative. Okay, my Y value is going to be negative when X is between 0 and 4. My Y value is going to be negative when X is less than 4. Okay, so that's how we need to think about it. Is where is my Y value going to be positive? Where's my Y value going to be negative? When X is what? Okay. And if it's got an arrow and it goes on forever, it's just that simple inequality. It's that one inequality. If it's in between like this, right, then it's gonna be that compound inequality. Okay, looking at that, any questions right now? Go ahead and try it. Okay, let's try it. Look at number 6 here. Okay, ignore the equation. The equation doesn't mean anything for us. I want you to figure out, you work with somebody around you, that's fine. When is it positive? When is it negative? Okay. Feel free to talk to someone.
Super.
All right, so how could we represent when our Y value is going to be positive? What inequality could we use, or inequalities could we use to say when the Y value will be positive? So, so it doesn't stop at -2 though, right? It's an arrow, so it goes on forever. So if an arrow goes on forever, we would just say when X is less than 0. Because it's any time going here forever, that's going to be positive. Okay. What about the other side here? What would we have for the other positive, right?
X is greater than 2.
X is greater than 2. Because from 2 on to forever, it's going to be positive. So that's where that graph is positive. X is less than 0, and X is greater than 2. So then when is it negative? When is it negative? Got it? From 0 to 2. So our compound inequality, when X is between 0 and 2. That's when it's negative. That's when it's below the graph. All right, because it's negative from here to here. That's where it's underneath, right? It's from here to here. So from 0 to 2, it's underneath the axis. The other times it's above. That's what we're looking at. Where is it underneath the axis? Where is it above the axis? Okay. I want you to recap this with somebody. Okay. When is it positive? When's it negative? Make sure we understand it. Okay. Any questions about positive versus negative? Okay. We have something in our notes about this. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. We're feeling okay on it.
Kind of.
What question do you have, Bishop? Well, I don't believe that. Because if you've been paying attention, you understand at least part of it. What specific question do you have? Okay, you have that down in your notes to look back at, to try. Okay. And when we get to the homework, if you don't understand it, you can't get it, then we'll talk. Okay, we gotta move on to the next part. And I said, this is gonna be very similar. It'll be very similar to what we just did. So it's important to pay attention here and understand the difference. This was positive, negative. This was above the axis, below the axis. The next one that we're talking about is not the same thing. It is increasing versus decreasing. Increasing versus decreasing. Okay, so this is different now. For increasing versus decreasing, we are going to read the graph left to right. We're going to ignore the arrows, and we're going to read it left to right, just like we're reading something. And as we go left to right, if it's going up, it's increasing. As we go left to right, if it's going down, it's decreasing. Back up, it's increasing. Okay, so from left to right, if it's going up, it's increasing. If it's going down, it's decreasing. Okay, so we need to be able to find when is it increasing, when is it decreasing. Right? It's going from left to right. It's going up, it's increasing. It's going down, it's decreasing. The arrows can trick you. Ignore the arrow. Okay, ignore the arrow. We are going up here. We're going up and then down and then up again. Increasing versus decreasing. The blue is increasing, the red is decreasing because we're reading it left to right. So now, once we know where on the graph is increasing, where on the graph is decreasing, they're going to ask you to do the same thing and say, all right, for what X values is it increasing and for what X values is it decreasing? So we're going to break up that graph to where it's increasing and decreasing, where those splits are. And we're going to use those inequalities again. We're going to say, all right, where is it increasing and where is it decreasing using our inequalities? So let's say that we use the number 2 here. We got a -2, we got a +2. That's where it switches from increasing to decreasing back to increasing. Okay, talk to the person next to you. What inequalities can we represent for increasing and for decreasing? What inequalities can we represent?
So from -2 to 2, So. Yeah.
All right, so if we're looking at this graph, we know we are decreasing between here and here, right? Between here and here, it's going down. Everybody can see that, yes? It's going down from here to here. So how can I represent what X values this part of the graph is? How can I say what X values are here? Cooper?
X is greater than -2 and it's less than 2.
There you go. This is where it's decreasing. It is decreasing when my X value is between -2 and 2. Right? In that area, that's where it's decreasing. Right? That is decreasing. Remember, anytime it's between two values, between two numbers, it's that compound inequality. And it's always going to look the same. It's going to be an X in the middle. It's going to be two less than signs. The bigger number, your smaller number. It's always going to look like that when it's between two values. Okay, now increasing. When is it increasing? What do you think? When is it increasing? Simone? When X is greater than 2, it's increasing. Okay, where else? Where else, Logan?
X is less than negative.
X is less than -2. Great. When X is bigger than 2, it's increasing. When X is less than -2, it's increasing. Right? It's going up to that point. It's going up after that point. Again, it's very similar to the last one. Because you're coming up with those inequalities, those compound inequalities. It's just a matter of where on the graph is it increasing, where on the graph is it decreasing.
Could you just do X is less than -2 or -3?
You could combine it with an or. Yep. Yep. Okay, any questions right now on increasing and decreasing? Okay. If I gave you number 5, what would you say for when our graph is increasing? When is the graph increasing? Here.
Wait.
Somebody said it. All real number. It's always increasing, right? For number 5, it's always increasing. So that'd be all real numbers. Okay.
I said no.
So if it doesn't switch, then it's all real numbers. It's always that one thing. Okay. All right. All right. So we'll practice that in the homework. Okay. We got one other thing to talk about. Okay. One other thing to talk about. This one we don't use as often here. This one is talking about the end behavior. The end behavior. This is just saying what's happening in our extremes. I'm about to explain it. You don't have to say, huh? I got you. It's what's happening in the extremes. When X goes negative forever, as we go left forever, what's happening to Y? It's getting lower, right? So as X goes negative forever, infinity is just forever, right?
Why?
As X goes negative forever, Y also goes negative. As X gets positive forever, as we go right forever, our Y is going up forever. Our Y is getting positive forever. Okay? If I had a graph, let's say that looked like this. And we wanted to talk about end behavior. Well, we would say, all right, as X is going positive forever, right? That's positive forever for X. What's happening to Y? Going down, right? Our Y value is going down. So we would say Y is going down forever. It's the way the arrow is pointing. Yep. So if the arrow is pointing down, your Y is going down in that direction forever. When our X is going negative forever, right? We're going this way. X is going negative forever this way. Where's Y going? Y going up or down? Down. The arrow is going down. So as our X goes negative forever, our Y goes negative forever in this example. Okay. End behavior is not going to be a drag and drop. End behavior is going to be, you got to type it in. So at the very least, tell me, as we go to the right, y gets negative. As we go to the left, y gets negative, or something like that, okay? It's just asking for end behavior as we go on forever, what's happening to y. Okay? All right, there's a lot here, okay? There's a lot here. It's very similar. I told you that from the start. So hopefully you have some notes that you can look off of. You got a lot of time to work on homework. That's on purpose so that you can ask questions about it, okay, when you're unsure. So please take advantage of that time. Go ahead.